Yesterday, I had an engagement as General Secretary of the PPP with the Private Sector Commission and its affiliates. They wanted to speak about the upcoming elections and they wanted the party's perspective on some of the issues in the public domain. It was a good meeting, and I commend the Private Sector Commission and its membership for being so interested in the transparency for the upcoming elections. They expressed concerns about instability and how instability could affect their well-being and the people who work with them. And I've pointed out that they have no, or they should have no concern about the PPP stoking any instability or any violence surrounding the elections. We have a track record that will show that in our entire history that we have always supported free and fair elections, and we've been a calming influence on people, even in periods when they've been tested and their patience tried, that we've always stood for peace, stability, respect for the dignity of our people, and we have fought against violence perpetrated by the opposition. I assured them that the government, although I was speaking as General Secretary, that the government is going to address the question of security robustly to ensure that the people of this country, they can exercise their constitutional right to select a government freely and fairly in a manner that will not lead them to be intimidated or causing violence to suppress their votes. They mentioned the issues of the voters list, what they've been hearing in the public domain, and I think that in most quarters there is a recognition now that the PNC and AFC, they have been misleading their supporters and also maybe themselves. By now, most Guyanese would recognize that constitutionally you cannot remove people's name from the voters list who have gone through the robust process and scrutinized process of being registered. And why do I say a robust process? It's the registration process is one that is highly scrutinized. It doesn't require only GCOM taking your name down and collecting your biometrics. That is the fingerprint, but it's done in the presence of scrutineers from the government and opposition in all of these registration centers. And then people have the opportunity to object to those names if they find that the registration is flawed, etc. So once you go through the process of registration, it's unconstitutional to have your name removed unless you die. And that is clear. There have been several rulings to that effect, and I think any right-minded person would recognize that any attempt to obfuscate it, as they are trying to do in their recent attempt to go back to the court on a matter that has already been litigated and ruled upon, it is all that is doomed to fail. And it's not because the list is flawed or because there is some sinister motive to steal the elections. It is part of our Constitution and law. If you get on the list, you cannot be removed except if you die. So migration is not an excuse. They are attempting to say now that we should go back through this exercise. So if we don't find you at home, you've migrated like temporarily or you've traveled abroad, your name should be removed from the voters list. So if you come back the day before the elections to vote, which is your constitutional right to do so, you wouldn't be able to do so. One challenge, one court case would stop the whole elections if we were to do that. A person who was on the list was taken off because you couldn't find that person. They're now resident in Guyana because that's unconstitutional. And this has been in the Constitution for decades. So I believe that's the objective. The objective is they already see they're going to lose the elections, so they want to repeat what happened with the Esther Pereira case. Either to stop the elections, get an individual to file a case in the court days before the elections to say my name has been removed because they couldn't find me on the day that they came around, and I can't exercise my constitutional right. And then the elections get delayed. So we're not going to fall into that trap. And I think the private sector and every right-thinking Guyanese have seen through their antics that they have been engaged in, that it's all a smokescreen, one, to prevent the elections or to create confusion around the election, or to get an excuse after they lose the elections as to why they lost. They would say the list was padded. As I pointed out in the past, in 2020, the list had 660,000 over that number, and only 460,000 voted because of the robust system in the polling place to prevent fraud, which is scrutinized by the polling agents of the different political parties. And they do have biometrics in the polling station to recognize you, which is a folio with your picture ID there, so that it's not just a name. They have a folio with your picture ID. They can't prevent you from voting without a card. So if you don't have your ID card or your passport, you cannot be prevented from voting, but you have to take an oath. And that is because of the ruling that from the court by Claudette Singh when she was a judge, in the Esther Pereira case. So that the biometrics matter to prevent voting or to vote has already been decided by the courts a long time ago by the person who is now chairing GCOM and ruled illegal in the past. You cannot prevent that. So on those two grounds, on biometrics and on the quality of the voters list, or the so-called padding of the voters list, we dealt extensively with that. And I said, We don't want anyone to do what the PPP wants. We want GCOM to act lawfully and in accordance with the Constitution of Guyana. As I had said in the past here when I was asked, what do you want? And I said, what I want is immaterial. It is what is lawful, what is constitutional. That's all we're asking of GCOM. And they come under a lot of assault. Just today, GCOM has had to issue a statement by some responding to some elements in the opposition who've been saying, oh, there is a plot in GCOM to steal the elections. The chair constantly sides with the commissioners representing the government. It's all nonsense. It's all nonsense. They're just trying to undermine the credibility of GCOM to fit in with the plot, the bigger plot, and to claim they're cheated when they lose because they see the writing on the wall. So all of this is just a big hullabaloo over nothing. Over nothing. It's the typical behavior of the APNO. So we dealt extensively with all of these matters. I assured members of the private sector that people's race and their religion and their gender and their age are not factors that will be used in a divisive way in the campaign by the People's Progressive Party. In fact, I pointed out to them, and we can do so with great deal of credibility, that we're the only multi-ethnic party in this country. We can do this credibly. No other party can say that. And so, because there was a fear that the divisive rhetoric will cause polarization as we get closer to the elections. And I assured people we have no interest in that. We're trying to bring people together. We're trying to change our party to work, and our plans are for all of Guyana. I pointed them in APNU's direction and AFC, and I pointed out how they use race cleverly in very creative ways, but it doesn't have the same sort of potency as the past. But they will not give up on that tool because of something that I've said to you repeatedly here at my press conference. They have no plan for the future, and that is clear as daylight when you listen to their musings, their ramblings at the press conferences. They have no clear plan for the future, no vision for Guyana that is all-encompassing, and they have no achievement. They have a very tiny list of achievements for the long period they've been in government historically. And they get very upset when you mention that. I'll deal with that a little bit later in the press conference. So these were some of the elements of the discussion that we had yesterday when I met with the private sector as General Secretary of the party. But we want elections on time. We want GCOM to act in an open, transparent, lawful manner. We want all the citizens of this country to have the right to choose their governments freely in a secure environment. And we, at least in the PPP, we intend to campaign on our track record and the fulfillment of our promises, not by dividing people, as the others want to do. I see the Minister of Finance has named Budget Day, and the President has given a brief overview of the focus of their budget in 2025. That is the budget to be presented shortly. And I want to re-emphasize what the President said, that the budget will be characterized by an enhanced focus on community issues, issues that have been raised by people in our numerous engagements when we visit these communities. And for anyone who is objective, you would see that this government has been in almost every community in the country repeatedly. People have an open opportunity to dialogue with the president, with the ministers. It gets live streamed. This level of transparency is unseen in many countries. If you look at the many countries in the region and globally, the citizens often are not afforded a direct contact with their leaders. And we have removed that barrier and the filters, and we have allowed direct engagement with the ministers. Sometimes it looks a bit messy. People raise issues and all of that, but it is a tool that this party will never give up on. That is allowing people to have their voices heard. We saw the level of elitism and aloofness by the last government. You had to go through layers of people to get to ministers. Ministers stopped recognizing their own friends and people who campaigned with them. They ignored them totally. They were living in a bubble. And we are committed to ensuring that that never happens. This is one of the hallmarks of the People's Progressive Party. Here too at Freedom House, you see hundreds of people come here every week. And even if we can't solve all of the issues, and it's impossible to solve all, at least they have a sympathetic ear and they get to meet someone. This is something we are not going to give up on. And it's positive for all of those who believe that, oh, we should not, the president should be maybe distant. He goes to all of these communities. And in one newspaper call it condescending. When the president visits the community, it's condescending. Imagine, that's access. Contrast that with Granger and when he was president. And so I think people appreciate that. And that's why hundreds of issues come up in these communities when you go there. People have raised several issues. They've raised the question of the national insurance scheme. And we have helped thousands of people who had issues with getting their NIS pension because of the employers not submitting their contributions or record of their contributions to the NIS. We have helped them now to get their pensions. There are several others who did not make the required 750 contributions to qualify for a pension. We didn't leave them out. We announced last year, the president announced, and it will be in this year's budget, a $10 billion allocation to assist all of those people who did not qualify, the thousands of people over the decades who did not qualify to get an NIS pension but made contributions to the NIS. They will get a lump sum of money. So we listen to people. We help to solve their problem. There are going to be thousands others who will benefit in the new budget from who did not make the pension, but they will get some money for the contributions that they made over the years. We listen to people about community roads. I remember going to Skeldon just as COVID was winding down, because we did not want to have large gatherings in the people period, in the COVID period. And at night, I finished my meeting, and at night, we went into Crabwood Creek, and people showed me the roads. Berbice had been totally neglected. Well, the whole country, but I'm just using Berbice. They had nothing, huge potholes everywhere. In the 5 years under APNU, all of the investments that we had made in community roads just disappeared. We were going back to the past. No focus on building community roads, they were all falling apart. Look at what has been done. It's hard now. We have less roads that are not paved now than roads that are paved in the last 3 years, because after COVID we focus on this in earnest. That's because we listen to people. So those who think we're spending too much money on fixing these roads, that came out from people. And not just here on the coast and in every region, but in every coastal region, but in the hinterland, we have done this too. So many communities now have seen in their communities roads being built that they never dreamt of, and connecting roads between communities that have made a significant difference in their lives, because we listen to people and we address those concerns. And many people complained about the health clinics in their villages. They didn't have a place to sit on. The place was dirty in the yard. We made some investments in these areas, not maybe adequate. They complain about the state of community infrastructure, the grounds, etc. And we started a campaign now to right across the country in the last few years to fix community grounds. I've spoken about this in the past. In Georgetown, we awarded contract for all 34 grounds in the city. These are community grounds from Agricola all the way to Cummins Lodge. And it's not only in Georgetown, but in Berbice, in Essequibo, right across the country. These were community type issues. So I'm not going to be comprehensive here today. I just want you to get the idea that we have been listening to people outside of the big issues that we have had to deal with. We have focused on community issues. But this year, there'd be an enhanced focus on additional community issues. The question of garbage disposal, the waste management has become a problem now in many of our communities. And so an enhanced focus on how we support these communities now to collect the garbage and dispose of it in a manner that would bring benefits to people in the communities without increasing the cost of doing it for the individual households. That will be part of the focus. We hear a lot about burial grounds. People say you should focus on the living, not the dead so much. But we hear a lot of those things about why aren't you cleaning this? Now, we will support a lot of the NDCs through more resources allocation in the budget for a lot of that sort of infrastructure, not just NDCs, but municipalities, the towns too, to ensure that we can do much more of these issues. So I'm not going to enumerate all of the things. Security across the country will be a big issue. Enhance investment in security for our people in the new budget. And then on the fiscal side, the new budget will incentivize people to work harder, because the taxation system would evolve in a manner that rewards those who make greater efforts and who work harder. So that's the principle for the budgetary tax measures that we are being guided by when we come up with the specific measures. And this is to ensure that the Guyanese population, both in the public sector and in the private sector, that they keep more money that they earn and less goes to paying taxes. So, for example, in the public sector, income has grown by $100 billion more per year from 2020. So clearly a massive growth in income. We have reduced taxes over the period from 2020 to now to ensure that of the $500 million in income per annum more in the public sector, that people keep more of that as disposable income. So it is income earned versus disposable income. And that is the idea here. We now have 60,000 more people in the private sector working who were not working in 2020. They are earning more money. So the taxation system would evolve in a way that would allow them to keep more of what they earn, particularly if they work harder. And you're going to see the specific measures in the budget to support this. These are just some key elements of or principles that will guide the 2025 budget. The focus on incentivizing those who work harder, growing more disposable income both in the public and the private sector through the taxation system, and then a focus on community issues that have arisen from our engagement with people. We have been addressing them, but an enhanced focus on addressing a lot of those issues. The budget, I expect the Minister of Finance, and he's very good at this, to point out the challenges of the past 4 years and to show the successes of our government too. And we will not be sidetracked from showing our successes in the budget. And so definitely he will talk about the issues that irk a lot of our detractors, that they want us not to talk about. He will be speaking of those things because they're worried about our repetition of these issues, not because they're not real, but because they don't have an answer to those questions. And what is this all about? So it just gives you an idea. There are two editorials that would tell you why they don't want us to mention these issues. So the first editorial is from this Kaichor News today to talk about Jagdeo and his news conference and how every week, first of all, they position themselves, the Kaichor News positions itself as the watchdog for the Guyanese public. The Kaichor News is not the watchdog for any person in the public. In fact, it's the political arm, the newspaper of a person who is declared himself as a candidate for the elections. If you're the watchdog and for the Guyanese public, then you should have a commitment to be truthful. But if you look through the Kaichur News, I can't find a single article that is reflective of objective reality. It's a bunch of lies that they tell all the time and distort things and peddle falsehoods for a political purpose. Now you enjoy constitutional protection and you will enjoy the defense of this government to publish, because we believe in free media and we believe in the right to publish even if the publication is critical of us, and you will have our full support for that. But you're not going to get compliance to your lies and cause us to dumb down or to be silent in the face of the distortion of facts. We will expose that, and this is what they can't handle, because week after week, at various fora, including at this press conference, we expose the lies of the Kaichur News, so much so that it has no credibility whatsoever now in any circles. It's seen as a tabloid, and people don't pay serious attention to anything that is published there, because week after week this happens. We expose the lies. So it touches them in a manner that is, I think even in their pockets. So they try to link it to everything else, or maybe it's like Trump criticizing the media, I see in this editorial, and that they're lifting the scales from the eyes of the masses. Imagine the arrogance of this and how ludicrous it is for Kaichur News to claim and that they are anything but a rag newspaper. But they don't want us. He is worried about my abuse. My abuse here every week, the abuse that he is worried about, is because I point out where they lie. And I emphasize our track record, what we have done. So they said Jagdeo speaks about, every week we hear about the plans to build the hospitals, a harbor bridge, miles of roads and schools, etc., and the checklist. But of course, what do you want us to talk about? These are issues that matter to the people of this country. You want us to talk about Glenn Lal and his checkered past? What do you want us to talk about if not the people's issues and how we have addressed them? And they don't want to talk about them because APNU never, their experience with trying to build a bridge across the Demerara River ended up in a scandal and Patterson being charged for the feasibility study alone. Doing a feasibility study illegally, basically, and with $160 million going to an unsolicited bid. That is their experience. In our case, it is happening now. You can see it happening. And I gather last night they had an unfortunate accident on the bridge. But you can actually see it. They don't want that. Why would the PPP want to talk about that? It must talk about what we want them to talk about, not what it's doing that would, when completed, will cause the lives of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. It will give them a benefit because they don't have to pay a toll and they can move easily across the two rivers, and the convenience that it will cause, an enhancement of business. But we must not talk about that. We must talk about something else. that they want us to talk about, and I'll come to that a little bit later. So that's editorial one. Don't talk about your track record. So this looks like another cut and paste, and I think the same person who wrote the last thing, I have a big suspicion who this person is. I think it's a reporter in the Starbuck News, was a particular beef with the government, did this editorial too. Having been caught with using the AI to generate a particular editorial in the last, they went back to this thing. It's almost like you can see one of those old-time PPP haters in camouflage writing this kind of editorial. So what about isms it's called? So the first thing is, Durban, the Cliff Anderson Sports Complex. First thing, why do you have to put in AC in it? You could take the money and put the AC around the country. You don't need AC. And then, in another editorial, the AC is now working. And why aren't there bucket seats in as yet? And you spend 351, a whopping, astonishing 351 million. All legitimate questions. You can question how government spends different allocations. Legitimate. But what is it? Instead of addressing the current shortcomings, the all too familiar response is, what about Durban Park? So now we can't compare spending 351 million to enhance this facility to spending $1.6 billion for the Durban Park. They don't have bucket seats here. Durban Park has, I don't know what kind of seats there. So we can't compare spending 351 with $1.6 billion that they spent there, of which the audit report said 600 million is missing. And the 600 million that is missing is more than the 351 that we spent actually on the facility here. But why this government always goes back to the past? And they want to hide track record. Track record matters. When the people of this country gave you the mandate to run the country, you have to account to them for it. And how would they account for spending $1.6 billion and getting nothing out of it and 600 million missing? We must not speak about that. But they got a right to speak about the 351. Can't go back that far in the past. So they lament it because they don't want the comparisons, because people see it. And you go into the Cliff Anderson facility and it's going to improve. We put in bucket seats later if they love bucket seats there. And it will grow. But simultaneously, we built in Linden 2 facilities, in one ICC lights and the other with FIFA lights, a track there. We're building one in New Amsterdam now, a track there, world-class track. We're building another stadium in Berbice. We've just, Anna Regina now would become a world-class facility. We're expanding right across the country. We're upgrading facilities. Told you earlier about the other things. Compare the two. But we must not compare, because in the comparisons they look bad. So let's don't go back to the past. Never mind, the same people are competing against us and pontificating on how we are doing things. But we must not say what they did when they were in government. So that was one element. So then it goes on to say, imagine your current child failing a school subject and casting blame on a teacher from the last term. This is the rationale employed by politicians who think incessantly referencing the past is sufficient to distract the electorate from their shortcomings. We're not referencing the past to distract the population from our shortcomings. We are referencing the past to show the magnitude of our achievements. Not our shortcomings, but the magnitude of our achievements. You had zero hospital that you were going to build. You had no plan. You had drug shortages, etc. Look at the plan that we have now. That's why we reference what you did. You made a mess of it all. You had no scholarship. You had a few scholarships for ministers and their families alone. We already got 50,000 people studying paid for by the government now. You increase UG fees. We promise free education at university. We're delivering it. We're referencing the past to show the comparisons between the two. We reference what they promised in their 2015 manifesto and what they did not do, which is almost everything in their manifesto, to say they're untrustworthy. They're good at making promises, but they're empty promises. You need to do that to show the nature of the AFC and APNU. Because they're coming to recast themselves, and you know what? In the recasting of themselves as Democrats and leaders now, the past comes back to haunt them, and they don't want that, so they get their stooges in these places to, why you have to go back and mention the people's past. But that is important for the electorate to compare parties, because the elections are about comparison of parties, and they're about believing who will fulfill their promise. And I keep asking, if you were a young Guyanese now, or any Guyanese for that matter, who would you believe, under which government would you believe that you would have the possibility of owning a plot of land and a house? Look back historically. And it would be the unequivocal answer. Whether you're APNU person or not, you would say PPP. And who would you believe that under which government it's easier to find, your road would be fixed? It's PPP. That is the comparison that people make. They don't want that. So the younger the voting demographic, the same editorial goes on to say that Burnham and Chetty are from a different era, and we should leave them there. They should tell APNU to leave its racism of the past in that era too. They don't tell them that. But and I think they were offended that I pointed out that Burnham was, as a sitting prime minister of an independent Guyana, was on the CIA payroll, confirmed by the documents that have been released online. And these are not opinions, they are records of documents that were classified and are now being declassified by the CIA and others. So for 5 years after he was the prime minister of independent Guyana, he was still collecting money from the CIA, which is a foreign agency. And the CIA and the others, the CIA and the British Secret Service, their role in dividing our population along ethnic lines, which they did in Africa using tribalism. If you go to Kenya and Tanzania and all these places, you will see their role there, that they divided people because they wanted to continue to perpetuate their own rule. They did that here, but he was in the pocket of those agencies, being paid by them. And that's clear as daylight. That's inconvenient for me, for them now that I mention this. But it's part of our history. Young people need to know that history too. I'm not saying we should be stuck in that era of what happened, but we need to know the history, because they paint themselves as glorious in the past, and that the PPP is unpatriotic and they were the bastions of patriotism and all of that nonsense. So when you talk about track record, and I did it in the context of 75 years of struggle on behalf of the people of this country and 75 years of working to change the lives of people in this country by the PPP. We have a proud record on that. So on extrajudicial killing, why did I have to mention Walter Rodney and Father Dark, who were killed in that period? They were killed by, and there were commissions of inquiry, international commissions of inquiry, that concluded that the PNC killed Walter Rodney. Now, what was the era? I was talking about political repression in an era when we did not have democracy, and that was part of our history too. So we must not talk about that. What about the extrajudicial killing today and stuff like that? People have a right to talk about it. They talk every day and lie about it too, extrajudicial killing. But we must not talk about Walter Rodney, one of our greatest scholars, a person who, when I go to Africa, until now, like many of the leaders in Africa, these are prime ministers, presidents, etc., they were inspired by Walter Rodney. Many of them were taught by him in university, etc. You should go back, and that was the WPA that mattered in the past. Now this WPA is a set of racists, that's all they do, and opportunists. They sat with APNU that killed the PNC, that killed Walter Rodney, their leader. They went into government with them, contented themselves with just taking cushy jobs, never helped anyone, and they're reacting from the loss of privileges now. They're a shadow of themselves. That was the party, Walter Rodney's party. When you look at it, at them today, you see zero, a set of opportunists and racists. Walter Rodney used to lecture at our party's school, Acrobat College. The PPP is called school where it was trained, that's the name, Acrobat College. And so I must not mention that, because why do we need to go back? And then they end up with a cycle of endless aboutism. We're not talking about aboutism, we're talking about real plans. So this is it. It's interesting to read this editorial. It is an apology, an excuse for all of those people. It's a convenient narrative now. Oh, don't go back to the past. Cathy Hughes said it at our press conference in the presence of all the AFC leaders. We're not taking questions from that period. That's the past, 4 years ago. So our track record doesn't matter. Our betrayal of the people don't matter. Our corruption didn't matter. Our lack of support for national development doesn't matter. We want to start afresh. But we want to criticize, we want to criticize what the PPP is doing. It's only two comparisons that you learn. And then you can isolate for yourselves. But this is an inconvenient narrative. So every week they're going to come at this. Every one of them, they're all singing from the same hymn sheet today. Don't go back to the past. Just mention the things we want to do. So they're trying to steer the elections to practically one issue because they have nothing else to talk about. So this, as I said before, no track record on education, health, job creation, infrastructure, etc. On democracy, they're trying to hide their track record on that because they stole the elections. So the only issue they're trying to make the election about, that's why you see a lot of it, is about the Exxon deal and renegotiation. One issue. But in trying to make this an electoral issue and to blame the PPP somehow for it, they're coming up with a big roadblock. And the roadblock is, who signed the agreement? Who signed this bad agreement? So, in as much when they push that narrative out there, people say, but isn't it convenient now? You're talking about the PPP not renegotiating, but you signed this agreement that is so lopsided. You're the one who did not put in ring fencing. You're the one who didn't agree to a 2% royalty rate. You're the ones who agreed to a 10%, a zero tax rate, a 75% of the revenue should go to cost recovery, all these issues. You're the ones who agreed to do this, including that Exxon should keep the decommissioning fund. Why are you blaming the PPP for this? You were in government, you signed this voluntarily, nobody held a gun to your head. So they are faced with that. And then they're faced with the fact that they hid the agreement. The agreement was not made public until December of 2017. It was signed in June of 2016. Nobody could have got a copy. Everybody was fighting for it. All the newspapers, the opposition saying, make public the agreement you signed. They refused to do it a year and a half. Then, December 2017, that's when they released it. In the year and a half, they had also collected 18 million US that they denied collecting, and then subsequently said, when exposed that they had collected the money, they said thought it was a gift. So that's their track record. So anybody who wants to blame the PPP for this would say, why are you blaming PPP? This is what you did in a period when you're in government. So that's very inconvenient to them. So they discovered something. They have to find a way of attaching us now to the deal that was there, that was made. So this was the new thing now. Jagdeo, as opposition leader, secretly agreed with coalition government to waive taxes to Exxon. This is the new thing to link the PPP to the agreement, because they find it inconvenient now to come after us. Kite News bombshell. Jagdeo secretly agreed with coalition to waive taxes. This is their bombshell. That's the news, front page news. So this is, so people are saying they got to be stupid about this. Where did this come from now? How come they didn't discover this all the years? We're now just coming up to elections, and now PPP agreed to the bad agreement in 2016. So the origin of this is in Trotman's book, which came out a long time back, and people recognize this as the biggest act of fiction since maybe the beginning of time, since nowadays. So nobody pays any attention to what Trotman writes. He is just justifying the past when what he did. He got Exxon to prepare the cabinet paper that he took to approve the same agreement. So what did Trotman say in the book that led them to believe this bombshell thing now? The book was always there in only a year now. So we're getting closer to election. So this is what he said. Interestingly, I've been previously informed that the leader of the opposition had been briefed and would offer no objection. And further, I should not elaborate too much on the specifics of the June 27 agreement, Exxon deal, except to note that it had been signed and to list some of the provisions. This advice I followed. So who told him this? He didn't say who told him this. Who advised him? He'd been previously informed that the leader of the opposition had been briefed. Briefed by whom? Exxon, by the PNC. He didn't even say whom. This is Trotman saying somebody telling me. A vagrant walked off the street and said to Trotman, you know, Jagdeo has been briefed. You don't need to give the Guyanese public this agreement. But although Jagdeo calling for it to be released as opposition leader, every day we've been calling, and all the newspapers are calling. Don't worry with Jagdeo calling for it. The vagrant said he'd been briefed. You only need to speak about a couple of things. Don't release no agreement. The vagrant told him not to release the agreement. That was the secret deal that I had with APNU. You think if I had a deal with APNU, they'd be loved to. All these years, they would have mentioned it. They would shout at the top of their voices. They're taking out ads. So this is their source now. The vagrant, Trotman, a vagrant told him that. And then Lal Bachan Ram, Christopher Ram, now known as Christopher Ram, he repeated this in his recycled arguments about the renegotiation. It lacks erudition. They just fill up the pages of the newspaper with nonsense. And I don't think they're so caught up with themselves that they don't recognize, as was pointed out by so many people who wrote subsequently, that they are just using recycled arguments and offer no real justification for the key issues at hand. It's just an emotive issue that they hope will win votes at the. So I'm not going to focus on Christopher Ram and this attempt. But he repeated the same thing. They knew that. And then this results in the headline. So let me tell you about what really took place. Any fool, or if Christopher Ram or the others wanted to do research, if they were really studied, as Leonard Craig said, AFC is just all make-believe, the leaders. What we've been saying a long time, that they're just fake intellectuals. They just run off, talk off the top of their head, and like he just devastated Vincent Adams. This his pretense at knowing things, his tenure at the EPA could be described in textbooks as one of sycophancy. And I don't know how he got the job, but quick to point out his credentials. He worked somewhere else. I've seen lots of that. People put their CV up and they really don't know anything. And I take Leonard Craig and his thoughtfulness any day above the entire leadership of the AFC. He is a thoughtful person and he thinks things through. And it would be a good thing to read his letter and see the vile response from the AFC. Just read his letter. If you have a chance, and he knows the inner workings of that party because he was in their leadership. I think he was Deputy General Secretary at one time. And it was, I couldn't characterize them better than he did. So if they had only researched the topic, they would find out that the motion to enshrine the tax the tax matters, this in the Exxon agreement. If you look at the Hansards, you will see that this matter was brought to Parliament. They say that it was brought to Parliament. This is what was brought to our Parliament, not the agreement, because people think that the agreement was brought to Parliament in August of 2016. This one-page order was brought to Parliament for affirmative action. That means the majority of members in the Parliament, once it's presented, could say yes. They are the majority. It was brought at, as Gail Teixeira pointed out, it was on a supplementary order paper. So it was not on the order paper, supplementary order paper for that day. It was the members of the Parliament on our side, as Gail Teixeira pointed out in her presentation, saw it at 7:47 in the night, the same day it was presented to Parliament. The debate on this issue started at 11:47 in the night. 11:47. So if you look at the debate in the Parliament, Winston Jordan said, so there were two members of Parliament from our side who spoke. It was Odinga Lumumba and Gail Teixeira. Odinga was on the Natural Resources, the Parliamentary Sectoral Committee on Natural Resources. So he led. This is what he said when they presented this one-pager, the motion. I am disappointed that we've been told about this motion on Friday, at least today at 2 o'clock. That is when it came on the order paper, and then they got the motion circulated later in the night, came on the order paper. I'm chairman of the Parliamentary Sectoral Committee on Natural Resources, and I was not informed about this motion here tonight. We cannot carry on like this in this country. We cannot carry on like this. This is Odinga speaking. Big oil is important, but big oil has already also shaken up the roots of many countries, whether it be Nigeria, whether it be Ghana, whether it be Venezuela. We have to be careful. Therefore, we have to work together. Informing us early about this motion cannot and will not allow us to say no. How can we? First of all, you have a one-seat majority. Secondly, we've been supportive of oil exploration and development for a number of years because we've been supportive of it. They found the oil under the PPP just before the government change. So we've always been supportive. What is the problem? Why is there this secrecy? It makes us feel funny. It makes us feel there is a hidden agenda. It's not a laughing matter. They laughed. It's not a laughing matter. It's a question of nationalism. It's not a laughing matter. We cannot embrace the future of our country in secrecy, in darkness. We have to do it in light. What are we afraid of? Minister Jordan has said that the current, and then it goes on. So Odinga, in the speech in Parliament, was complaining about the motion that came there to be passed the same night to give effect to an agreement that we hadn't seen. Because the agreement was signed in June, but this was just the order to bring the tax benefits in place. But it didn't say what taxes. It's just an order, one-pager. So that I can go on to talk about Gail Teixeira, but so Gail spoke about 17:55 p.m. tonight was when she saw it. Let me read Gail Teixeira here. In other words, the written laws referred to are the Income Tax Act, the Income Tax in Aid of Industry Act, Corporation Tax, and Property Tax. In other words, we are being asked in this House by the motion to support the order which talks about an agreement between the companies and the government of Guyana waiving or removing the requirements of paying taxes, income tax in aid of industry, corporation, and property tax based on an agreement with the government of Guyana. However, what I seem to have missed in the minister's presentation was for how long this will take place, because we did not have the agreement at that time. I would ask the minister to be patient with me, because I said this before June 2018, but because I think he said June 2018, but I may have missed it. So if this is the agreement, how long will 51(2) not apply to the production sharing agreement with these companies? Is this 1, 2, 3, 5, or 10 years? She was asking about the tax benefits to Exxon under this agreement. We're asking. No answers, no agreement there, just passing it through because they had the majority of the vote. However, and I skip, however, when we are talking about production sharing agreements in which the coffers of Guyana would be lessened, or we are giving concessions, obviously we want people to come here. We also have to say under what conditions this agreement will hold. Is it for, as I said, a honeymoon period just until oil starts sprouting out? Is it 5 or 10 years? This is what Gail goes on said, and we have no apologies to make. We find this unacceptable. We are not comfortable with this agreement, and she was only talking about an agreement that we had not seen. This is the position. I don't want to go through too much. So in the parliament, Jordan says in his presentation they're strengthening the benefits. We did not see an agreement. We asked to see, they signed the agreement in June of the year. They brought an order for affirmative action to rush through one night to give effect to the agreement and the benefits, but nobody saw the agreement until a year and a half after. Imagine they took to Parliament to approve, did not share with the other members of Parliament the agreement at which they were referring to. Trotman cleverly created the impression that it was the 1999 agreement signed by Janet Jagan, that we didn't bring this enabling order under the Petroleum Act of 1986. And Jordan spoke about strengthening the benefits for the people of the country in an agreement we had not seen, that we were in the public domain asking for. You heard the two persons who spoke there, but we were not negative. We wanted to support the growth of the industry, not like this government that is hostile to government on everything. We said, share with us what's gonna happen. How long would this agreement last? What's the duration of the tax holidays and everything else? Gail Teixeira, it's in our answer. Had they spoken, had they just looked at this, not spoken, researched this, they would see that this here, the lie that they're telling here, that we had secretly agreed with the coalition, was just a plain lie. We were fighting to get the agreement released. This is the history of it. So this is what they're trying to do now. That's why I think they're trying to link us back to this bad agreement they signed, because you can't, our tenure, our stewardship of the oil and gas sector is characterized by gas to energy. It's character that we're working on. It's a local content law. It's the new petroleum activities bill updating the 1986 one. It's the stronger environmental permits. A whole range of, it's auction now, a new PSA, a whole range of stuff like that. It's positive. And so somehow to get rid of all of this strong track record, we had secretly agreed, because the vagrant told Trotman that Jagdeo had agreed with them. The track record will prove differently. They did not release this agreement until a year and a half after it was signed, after they had a big public uproar over it, led by the People's Progressive Party, with me as opposition leader. Every week I spoke of this agreement that they would not release. We haven't seen it. We'd like to see the agreement. How could we have agreed with something that we didn't see? So they're using this clever thing, the motion that they bring, where we express concern about it, to say, oh, they agreed with the agreement, with the 2016 agreement. It is typically Leonard, Craig, how quickly the shine disappears from people. And I think by now, every Guyanese would recognize that the AFC is probably even more, they're actually worse than the PNC for me. Worse. Because they lie, they have no position, they have no commitment to anything. They think you can bullshit people and get away with it, and they get exposed every week. Look how, from the rising star Nigel Hughes now he looks dumb and blunt and thin-skinned. And that's why they had to go after Craig. In such a short historical period, the blunders that they have made, I don't think you can match that for a political party. It's hard. Even PNC would not do that. The gas to energy project, they lied to the people and just moved on. They just move on. They said, oh, there's no loan. You're not going to get the loan. They moved on now that the loan is approved. He refused to answer the Exxon conflict situation, where he said, and my client interest would prevail above Guyana. Left that hanging. Left hanging also how much money is collected over the years from and his role in the 2016 agreement, Nigel Hughes. Left that hanging. The apology for their role in the election, they reviewed. 1 week they're doing the review, the next week they're not doing the review, the next week they're blaming GCOM for the delay in the review. Then he goes to court and says the elections were not rigged. They were not rigged, but he is now considering whether they should issue an apology for the rigged elections. Confusion again. He says they're not taking questions from the past. Which party says that? They admitted they had no plan for the future. He wants to get the government to sit with him and work out a plan for the future of the country. No plans for the future on their own. The Warao issue just showed the lack of commitment to anything. Thought it was a political issue, then discovered the Waraos are not going to vote. Took them the night, carried them, said, put a big public statement, I'm feeding the Waraos and housing them. The next day, he drops them off at the ministry and say, here, he handed over the warehouse back to the government to take care of, because he realized they're not registered, they're not voting, etc. This is the man who, in his 15-point response to Randy Basad, he defends the laying off of the sugar workers. Not even Norton does that now. He defends the laying off of sugar workers. He defends the removal of the children grant, the 10,000 grant. He defended the removal of the joint services bonus. A whole range of stuff. He still, until now, argues that the CCJ is wrong. From now, more and more people think, as he's being exposed, how mediocre he is now, because people had this impression of him that was like all erudite and sophisticated. But now people recognize him for what he is. He says the CCJ is wrong. 34 must be the majority of 65. Still digs in on this. As recent as a couple of weeks ago. Defends their lack of adherence to the Constitution in the no confidence motion when it's clear what should have applied for anyone, any right-thinking Guyanese. So this is someone who has really I can go through the track record, his track record, like what he did in the past. But what really this week, I saw a youngster wrote about his response. So on a program he said that the PPP disappeared basically 1,200 young Afro-Guyanese. 1,200, yes, 1,200. So I pointed out here that even our most extreme critics don't use that number. Only the madmen like Bork and the others. But most people, like Starbuck News, did a studied piece and showed that 400 people were killed over that period, and that many of them were policemen killed by the bandits, some of the bandits themselves killed by police, some were victims, and a few people didn't even die who was on that list that they circulated. So, and that it was Indo-Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese too on the list. Maybe 100 and something of the list of the 400 were Indo-Guyanese. So, and this was over a period. So he could lie now and still talk about 1,200 to create this impression around young Afro-Guyanese that, oh no, this is a party that killed young people. Young black men can't have a future with this party because it used to kill you out. Lie, blatant lie. So when asked about this is what the guy said. I've been practicing law for 37 years, and between 1992 and today, I've represented the families of several people who have either been shot, killed, and murdered by the Guyana police force. And the numbers I have and the circumstances in which people have been shot and killed, I believe the number I gave is accurate. The number he has and the number he gave, 1,200. So somebody needs to say, just release the number. Of course, he doesn't have the number. The people he defended, he said, he came up, this is the science of the AFC. I have the numbers because I defended a number of criminals over the 37 years that I practiced law. Therefore, it has to be 1,200. Didn't say how, came up with the 1,200, but he defended criminals. So we know his ties. Starbuck News, cops probing Hughes' ties to Banjura. Starbuck News of 2013. This is when one of the guys who was involved in the killing of people in Lusignan, including children, was being tried. And the judge asked if anybody in the jury or the lawyers knew each other. And I think the chairman of the panel of jurors knew Nigel Hughes and didn't say a word, and Nigel Hughes knew him, which is illegal. Could be jury tampering. He didn't say that. He was being probed by the police for this, Nigel Hughes. Removal of the, this was in another newspaper. I think there might be Kaichor News or Stabrook again. Removal of the tape from the gas station in Buxton when the Hamiltons, I think, were killed. Remove the evidence from the station. 3, again, Kaichor News. He said on the APNU, he said one of his clients was on a roof and saw the police kill somebody. This is on the APNU. Kaichor News and others exposed the man was never on a roof, 2.5 ball field away, they described it as. Couldn't see what was going on. He took the guy to a press conference. He has a history of this sort of thing. A history of this sort. I don't even want to be comprehensive. The ultimatum that led to the beating of people at Agricola, etc., was given by him. He said to Ramatar, if after midnight tonight you don't have that, you'd see some additional activities. I don't want to focus too much on Nigel Hughes because I think he blossomed and he's spent already. You know, you have some flowers that wilt quickly. Well, they try to promote him as the savior of the opposition, etc. He has a long track record of, I don't want to say wickedness, but unscrupulous activities. And he was right in the center of the AFC in their disastrous period in government. He was in the middle of the engagements on Exxon, the negotiations. And now on all of these projects, they don't have any position. This is a hopeless party, and they're very thin skin in the matter. Norton, another Kaichor News headline. Norton, Jagdeo must explain how gas to energy project is feasible without final cost still unknown. This guy is, and front page of the Kaichor, this is where they find a welcoming home here with their nonsense. Last week I took the time to point out just 2 components of the benefits would result in $388 million of savings to the consumer. I pointed out we'd save as a country $100 million a minimum per year and that's per year in foreign currency because we don't have to buy the fuel. So it's a saving to the treasury. On that, we would be supplying, we don't have to import bunker C to generate our power. That's it. If you just look at the benefit stream and you know what the cost, so we already know what the pipeline cost is. Last week I reaffirmed that. The pipeline cost, we know what the project cost is for the power plant and the NGL facility. We know what the cost is for the control center. We know what the cost is for the transmission main. So every one of the 5 components of the project, we already have awarded contracts with costs. Sometimes like if you have escalating prices, it may move up or down a bit, but that's the cost of the project. And we have given that figure already to the public. It's just that I don't know if he pays attention to this issue. So the figures are known and the benefits are so enormous that you could shut your eye and say that this is a feasible project. And now an independent group that's make a big loan to the project has done the feasibility study themselves and the environmental impact study and said this is a great project. But he wants to look at feasibility study today. This is the hopelessness that we have that calls itself opposition. I'm going to end here. Thank you.
Mr. Jagdeo, then Shibal. Sir, could you say, first of all, what will be the source of Guyana's financing for its 50% of the total cost of the Quarantine River Bridge? That's my first question.
We can, if we can acquire the loans, it would be a loan. So I would say that it's a loan.
So are you looking at to acquire the loan from?
It could be from China, but it could be from any other source.
Any of the sources been approached as yet?
There have been several places have been explored. We have explored with several potential financiers.
And how close are you to signing on the dotted line?
Well, signing the line presupposes that the other partner would be able to raise their money. So we can raise our money swiftly. We've already done a lot of groundwork on this. So we can raise our share of the project swiftly.
Basically what, you're waiting in Suriname?
This is a joint project with Suriname, and we're going to share the cost because the benefits would be shared by both countries too. We will get a ton of our exports into Suriname, and if we do our deep water harbor, I think we'd be able to capitalize, repay this loan with great ease once we do the deep water harbor in the Berbice area. So we have looked at the benefits to Ghana. They are great. The benefits would also be great for Suriname itself, for its industrialization and development purposes. I think both countries recognize that it's a good project. We've been working at this for a while. It took longer than anticipated because they had to go through several iterations of contractors and going back and forth because it's a joint project. We're at a stage now where the parties have to come to the table to say we can come up with our share of the money. We're prepared to make that commitment now, and we can raise our share of the resources swiftly. And once the other side can do that, then the project will move fast.
Has Suriname said when they might come back to the Guyana government?
No, I don't know what's the position of like today. It might be, that's our generic position. You have to ask, I think Edge Hill is in daily contact with them. So I'm not in daily contact with those people who are working on this project, but that's our position now.
And moving away from the bridge, Mr. Jagdeo, when will the 2025 budget debate begin? Seeing that the budget
I did not get that, sorry.
When will the 2025 budget debate begin? Would it be the following Monday or would it be 1 week after?
Gail Tisher should be able to answer that. We have to give a period. We'll give the period that between the presentation on the budget and the start of the debate is defined by a standing order. So we will ensure that we comply with the standing order.
Okay, I saw the budget day being Friday, so I was wondering if you jump right into the debate on Monday.
We will comply with the standing order. That's all I'm saying. We will comply with the standing order.
Okay. And quickly, sir, given the fact that the Data Protection Act is yet to be operationalized.
Which Protection Act?
Data Protection Act.
Okay.
What assurances or what safeguards are in place to prevent the data from the cash grant registration being used for purposes other than which they're intended?
So it's not. So what data do we collect in the cash grant registration? It is the person's name, ID, picture, and address. Okay, these are the key fields. I don't want to feed into this conspiracy that APNU had started, and because they are doing a disservice to a number of people who may support APNU, but are afraid that somehow the government may misuse their data. And those people are not going to register, they're not going to get their money. And the APNU leaders, most of them have already registered to collect the money. They're not worried about the misuse of their data, but they say that on the ground to people. So I don't want to feed into the conspiracy theory. The preliminary voters list would be available to political parties now, and that has over 700,000 names, people, address, and all their particulars, and available to political parties now. What are we collecting here that is any different? 700,000 names would be in the hands of Congress, please, of every person on the voters list. What about them misusing that? That's more than what we even collected so far. So it's all a hype over nothing and lies to create fear among people, but just as an excuse again to diminish a good initiative. A good initiative. They can't handle the initiative. First they were saying, oh, the government will never do this, they would, and stuff. They wanted it done. Now when we did some of this, they're saying, oh, it shouldn't have been done. Can you afford it? It would cause inflation. That's what I'm hearing now. It would cause inflation. We don't want you to register people because they want confusion. Some of them deliberately stoke. Now there is bad, in many cases bad, planning on the ground to distribute the checks. And it has led to some difficulties among people. And that's something that we need to work on improving, the government. And a lot of the officers who are doing this need to do this with a bit more heart. But they deliberately stoke skepticism about it because they want to do that for political purpose. They think by creating an issue around its distribution that you can negate the benefit of people receiving the grant, and therefore convert that in somehow to a political benefit. It's all public data. I don't see a single bit of information there that anyone can use. Nevertheless, the ministry shall not and will not release that data to anyone. And that is why we passed the Data Protection Act, because not just there for public information generally, it is going to be important for with all of these cameras that we are putting up around the country, the privacy, that along with the Privacy Act, that they would be important to safeguard people's rights in the country.
My last
And
question.
also the program to develop this medical, electronic medical records. So we don't want people's medical records to be available to anyone. There'll be strong penalties against anyone who releases without the person's authority their medical records. So we want to improve the system, but we want to give people to continue to have the right over their own data.
Mr. Jagdeo, last question. To what extent are you, as General Secretary of your party and as Vice President of Guyana, convinced beyond any reasonable shadow of a doubt that any of the cabinet members are in fact publicly known or have any hidden interests in any companies?
We made it clear that there should not be any conflict of interest in the discharge of your work. And so I recall, and I think I mentioned it here, a conversation that we had with Minister Indar when we were discussing the cabinet membership. The government had just come into office. It was a COVID period. Country was shut down. And we met in the cabinet room with him. And at that time, he had ownership of some companies in the oil and gas sector. So we know in public works that they had a lot of connections with the oil and gas industry. So we said to him, you have to disengage. You can't start. This was before we got into office. He had a company that was working. He was a shareholder for the oil and gas sector. Throughout the APNU period, we said to him, you have to disengage from this. Or you can't be a minister. So he said, could I discuss this with my family? Went across, and we said, okay, go and come back. He came back and said, I'm going to remove myself from the company. And that's what he did. So there are many ministers who had companies from the past too. We made it clear that you must not use your position as a minister in any ministry to influence the award of contract to you, to related companies. And if you earn money from a company in which you have shares, first of all, in the Integrity Commission report, you have to declare whether you have shares in companies. If you make a false declaration there, you go to jail. If you make a false declaration. So you're required every year to declare, and to declare your earnings from those shares, not just ownership of shares, but to declare that. So that is the position now. Not that people cannot own investments anywhere. If they take their money and buy shares in a particular company, but that company must not be, they can't use their influence to steer business to that company, and they can't be in their own sector or their ministries, etc. Some that happened in the past. You remember we had, and this is particularly so under APNU, where the Minister of Housing was awarding contract to a company that her husband owned in the company, in the sector. in the Ministry of Housing under APNU. We had the infamous case of Cathy Hughes that Nigel Hughes is now saying that in court that she didn't act unlawfully when she approved contracts for her own company in her own ministry. He's saying she didn't act unlawfully. Yes, the witness, do you know of any law that prohibits this? That was his question to the witness. And the witness said no, but I think it's unethical. I'm not a lawyer. There may be a law, but I think it's unethical. So that's my response. So you can you have to declare, and if you don't declare any interest you have there or any income on, you can go to jail.
But have you been able to ascertain whether indeed the other ministers apart from Mr. Eldar are actually having interest in companies and they are abiding by the rules that you have set out?
Yeah, because the thing is that this is a person, if they're designed, if anyone wants to do what you're saying, they would never give this information. What we say to every year, we've said to every minister and every MP of the PPP, you have to file your Integrity Commission report by a particular date. That's what we say to every one of our people, and they have to comply with that. All the ministers, all of our MPs. No, I don't. I don't look into their business if they own shares in Bank of America abroad. Once they declare it and they use their own money and legitimate money to do that, that's fine with me. In that case, because we knew he had interest, he was working for, which company was working for the sector under APNU.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo, Trina Williams, Ghana Chronicle. Just one question from me. Will the state be appealing the $24 million award in the Quindam Bacchus case?
Yes, this matter was drawn to the attention of the president. Apparently, the AG and the others were planning to appeal the judgment. And the president made it clear there should be no appeal and that the award must be paid to Quindam Bacchus and their family. I think the president should answer that, but he made it clear.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo. Milton Granum for Starbrook News. What is your projection for this year and for the next 5 years if the PPPC was re-elected in terms of the percentage of renewable energy?
I didn't get the first part.
If the government is re-elected, what is your projection for this year and the next 5 years in terms of renewable energy?
Okay, so percentage might be hard to work out at this stage. Yes, so what might be, I can tell you of the projects, because what happens is that you have an expansion, changing projects, so the mix would be changing. So clearly, as I was asked at the last meeting, I think it was, that hydropower has to be part of the energy mix of the future. So return to the Amilas Fall project. Now that project, when we were developing it was 165 megawatts at the beginning. We're told with new technology now that without increasing the size of the reservoir, you can get up to 300 megawatts from the same project. So it depends on what the final configuration of the project is and its output. But that could move, add between 165 to 300 megawatts of renewable power. That's one. Two, we plan to put in at least 100 megawatts of solar power. This is leaving out the small solar panels that are given to each household in the riverine and the hinterland communities. But these would be connected to the grid, 100 megawatts of solar power. Already about 35 megawatts is being installed in three regions, 6, 2, and 10. We will get 300 megawatts coming from gas to energy project. Now, why this may not be considered renewable energy, but as you saw, it would reduce the emission profile of the country. So if we burn 100 million or a million barrels less of bunker C, which is much more polluting, 1 million barrels per year, then we can cut from the same maybe emissions by 50% by generating with gas instead of bunker C. So that also would cut our emission profile. Number 4, it is solar. We are exploring solar, but this would be more, not solar, wind power, but it would be more for isolated communities. So these are some of the things that will be part of the energy mix. We may then go to another 300 megawatts coming from the gas. We may be able in the future to bring gas on shore from the other project that we're hoping to work with Exxon to monetize the gas. There's a possibility either to use it for LNG or alternately to bring it on shore, generate power for exports. So all of those will be part of our energy mix, but some will be for domestic consumption and some for export using our gas, because we can add value to that. It's when you look at it, because they're variable. So if you go with 165, it will be one percentage versus 300 if you get from the hydro. But I can tell you clearly which projects will be part of the overall energy mix of the country.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jagdeo. Rihanna, Kaichur News. I have 2 questions. The first question is on the issue of the waiver of taxes to Exxon. Sir, the order to waive the taxes to Exxon was unanimously passed in Parliament with the support of your party. I heard your explanation earlier, but can you say why your party, including yourself, supported this waiver without seeing the agreement or being privy to it?
For one reason, that we were in the sector, we had worked very hard to get the oil industry going in Guyana. From seeking out people to put money into this industry for years, exploration, when nobody wanted to do so, to the entire period when we had a force majeure, we solved a border issue to get people to come back to the table beyond the force majeure. And so we knew that we had oil. If you look at the US Geological Survey, we knew there was oil. We support the development of an industry. We are not the PNC. We don't, because they're in government, we have to run down everything. That's why our positions have always been consistent in government and opposition. We can with great credibility. So we are told here at this late hour, one, that they strengthen the agreement. They strengthen the agreement, fiscal terms. We raised the concerns, but they didn't need our support to pass the affirmative action, the motion. All they needed was to vote. Our vote did not make a difference. We said, in the context of not seeing the agreement, but Trotman said, I have the transcript of what Trotman said. He said, oh, this was an oversight. The 1999 agreement by Janet Jagan was not, let me find it for you. I'll find it just now. I want you to read what Trotman said in there. Trotman. So I'll share it with you later because it's in the Hansard and it's a big set of answer. But he said this is the 1999 agreement. We didn't say it. That didn't stop us from arguing that the provisions must be known to the populace. So that was it. It was clear as daylight. Our position then. And we were the ones calling for the release. So you heard what Trotman said. Trotman said the vagrant told him that we are not going to oppose. Not the passage. We were not going to oppose the agreement, which we had not seen. So I think we dealt with it already. That's why I explained the Hansards extensively and what Gail Tischer, only 2 persons spoke on our side. And they both expressed concern about the absence of the agreement here today. Our approval or no, our support or not wouldn't matter. It was just an affirmative action.
I have another question. The public is asking for you to publish the environmental and feasibility studies done by the U.S. Exim Bank.
Which public? No, I'm not. Which public asked that? Would Glenlal be able to read this if we publish it? I can.
Are you willing to?
With everything we publish, the Kaichor News used to make a big issue about, oh, we didn't publish all of these contracts that were signed with the oil company. We published the ones, the permits. We published the ones signed on the APNU. We put all of the environmental permits online. All the agreements that we signed, the large-scale mineral agreements, they complain about that. We put that online. Nothing. Absolute nothing. So you want the environmental feasibility study now from Exxon, not Exxon, Exim Bank. Ask Exim Bank for it. Ask Exim Bank. Let Glenlal make a request. They think he's a madman. Yeah. Actually, most people think he's mad. Yeah, all right.
So I take that as a no.
No. You take that however you wish. You can put Jagdeo refuses to release this. It's a rag. It's a rag. I don't care what you think about me. It's a rag newspaper. No matter what we say. And it is some of the silliest things. People don't even understand. Yeah, go on.
Good afternoon, Tricia Sobers, Guyana Times. I have 2 questions. I'm going to give it one time. Can you comment on the pace of government following up with commitments made to citizens? And I believe you would have seen the recent posts made with the man who is living with a disability being gifted. You know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, but we can't. I heard of it, something, but I don't pay too much attention to that sort of thing. You could easily, you have people. I have helped a number of people who've come here. They come to Freedom House, they have one issue, you help them on one issue, then they come the next week, another issue, the 3rd week they want a contract, and then the 4th week they want something else. every week, all the time. And then before you think you're their father. Now, we've been helping tens of thousands of persons. We've been helping tens of thousands of persons. You think we can just take a picture with one man and pose for the picture and post it everywhere and then relax on doing what else we have to do? Let me tell you what we do. We're trying to diversify the economy. We're trying to use oil money now in a manner which is only 30% of the budget to transform healthcare, education, infrastructure, create more jobs. We're making provisions for a digital society. We're passing provisions now like Privacy Act, Data Protection Act, so that we can institute new, more efficient systems in government. We're making our airport paperless. Every day we're fixing NIS, we're getting more benefits there. We're dealing with cash grant for every citizen, $100,000. We're giving people with disability grants. We have double old age pension. We're working to give the children $50,000. We're raising minimum wage. You think we can be judged by one man take a picture with a man on a wheelchair or somebody complaining? You have a lot of complainers too. I don't know a person, but you have gripers, perpetual gripers. And they come here all the time too. And then they're the very ones who go out in the public domain. And they can play fools too, you know? Like they play a lot of people. They come to me. One guy, you know, I don't want to say he has a disability. So he wrote me a letter to help fix his fence. I got him a job. He wanted me to fix his fence, and he wanted some help. So then I saw him with another minister, and I asked, and he had written to 8 ministers, and they're all considering giving him help to fix the fence. So some people play the system too. Now there may be legitimate cases of people who need stuff. But what about all the others? Governments have to take care of large numbers of people. And so you can, any single day, critic could walk around here and find a man who said, the people they come here and say, they're gonna fix my road, but they haven't started as yet. But we have to, of necessity, we have to now go, send an engineer there, do the designs, we have to go out to tender, get a contract. By the time you deliver on that promise, it may be 4 or 5 months down the road. But we don't forget our promises. We don't forget, and we try to help as many people as possible. So you can't run government by dealing with like a single issue. Somehow people believe, oh, I can put up a nice picture of myself somewhere doing something, and that is somehow automatically translates into my ability to run government. Look at this clown Glenn Lal every week. Who you think he could run a cake shop really without evading taxes? This guy has a history of criminality. That's why he gets so upset with me, because I can point this out with credibility. He used to run a backtrack ring in this country. You can find a ton of people in New York who will tell you how he used to coach them how to evade U.S. customs, immigration rather. And he is the voice of the people. Well, I don't know if he says that voice of the people. No, the conscience, his editorial. He wants to remove the scale from the masses' eyes. When we remove the scale from the masses' eyes about him, he has a big problem. So we are not, I see a lot of antics being played out the last week about who will contest and who will take votes from the PPP and all of that. And as General Secretary of the PPP, when people call me, I said, relax. You don't see me. Relax. Y'all. Just relax. The thing is that you get worked up, you get caught up with social media and all of that. It's one thing. You think the people sometimes think, oh, I got like big following, etc. on social media. I can translate it into votes. I was saying to someone the same thing. If celebrity used to influence people to vote, look at Beyonce and Oprah Winfrey and Taylor Swift and all of the others. They supported Kamala Harris. They urged people to vote for her. Donald Trump won the elections, 70-something million votes. So people just love the entertainment. There's one thing with entertainment and another thing when your future of your children matters. You think Glenn Lyle could ever sit credibly with any oil and gas company to negotiate anything? You think he could have put together the gas to energy project or the local content law? He is shallow. And the band of crooks that he has around him, or even worse, they're trying to rip off. There were one from Florida who comes here a lot. He is one of the biggest scams that you could think of in the country. They raise money and take the people's money, tell them they're fighting politics in Ghana. They're going to give them things if they get into office or they get a seat to control the parliament. They will give them money. It's pipe dreams. Pipe dreams. So we haven't really started our campaign as yet. When we start, that's why it wasn't a threat to anyone. What I said is people have a right to form political parties. I've defended their right. Everyone, including the madman Glenn Lyle. He has a right to form political party. It's his right as a citizen of the country. We will defend that right in the People's Progressive Party. But don't underestimate the electorate. And when their futures matter and their children's future matter. Too often these parties underestimate the electorate. And people see through all the antics and stuff. So that gets maybe social media attention for a day. But I would say to you, we are right now trying to put in the hands of every single guy needs $100,000. And the difficulty in doing that, you know how many man hours have to be engaged raising the money to get that done? Think we can just focus on one issue? No, the answer is no. And post one picture a day.
And my second question, as relates to the recent distribution of the old age pension, is there a better system in place through the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security to ensure that persons who are unable to collect or receive their pension books on the official date actually access that through a smooth process?
I can't imagine why this can't be done through a system. They have made some serious changes to get the big books to the pensioners faster and in a more convenient way. I know what those changes are, and I've seen a major improvement from what it was under APNU. But clearly, we still have too many cases where people have difficulties, and a lot of it is the people we have. That's why I mentioned some of these officers who we hired to do this. They don't operate with their heart. They just do things callously. They could just have 100 pensioners waiting there in an office and then just shut the door and go off for the half day. Just leave the people there and say, come back, come out, and say, come back another day. And they have traveled there, used their money, their time, they're elderly, and they have to just come back because this person has some appointment somewhere else or got to go on, I don't know, fix their hair or something like that. And men do that too, not women. It's not a sexist thing. So they do that. They all around. So that sort of thing, it's disgusting. And that's where the social media should be focused on, holding these officers to account. Because they go down there, some of them just love the confusion. They sit there, the people outside, they wait. They're supposed to start at 8:30, they start at 11, sitting in their offices, making calls, doing all sorts of things. People have to start performing public service in a manner where they want to. There's a desire, they do it with they have empathy for the people who are using the service. So you see, if you fire one of those persons, suddenly there's all kinds of things. Oh, they fire me unfairly, etc.
Dr. Jagdeo, Mikhail Rodriguez for Daybreak News. Is your government willing to some extent to accept responsibility for this kind of backlash that comes from social media? Taken into consideration, sanctions were brought against an individual for sums of money amounting to about $50 million that were stolen from the coffers. That person now comes about and shares money willy-nilly and creates an embarrassing situation for the government, while the government sits by idly, not following up on what the Americans have, to some extent, shown clearly is gain from the pilferaging of Guyana's gold and illegal acts in this country, and people are allowed to walk about. Like if this came from heaven and they're passing it on to people, is the government going to accept responsibility for bringing this embarrassment for itself by not addressing this illegality?
So 2 weeks now you've been asked, both weeks you've asked me about this particular issue. And let me make it clear what I said last week. I saw Nigel Hughes and the others conveniently jumped in. Conveniently, because I think they're hoping that somehow this would bolster their own faltering campaigns and enhance, as I said before, their electoral fortunes. Let me say this again, that people in Guyana, any person in Guyana, is entitled to due process. Any person. So there have been reports from the US government in relation to the Mohammeds about evaded taxes. That matter is engaging the Commissioner General, and at the appropriate time, they will have an opportunity to present their side of the argument in line with due process, and the Commissioner will be able to look at that matter. Before then, I don't want to comment on their criminality or lack of criminality. They are entitled, the Mohammeds are entitled as Guyanese citizens to have their side of the allegation heard and or to respond to these allegations and present evidence to the contrary. If they fail to do so, then they become liable to pay the taxes. and the consequences that arise from those, the other consequences. If one of the Mohammeds want to enter into politics, has been speculated, and there is nobody knows whether this will happen or not. I think they're being encouraged to do so by some individuals who believe, or are hoping, maybe with great, because they can't do it themselves, that somehow this will affect the PPP. We're not worried about that. That if they want to do that, if they choose voluntarily to go or with inducement to get into politics, it's their right to, as Guyanese citizens. And I said that last week. If they want to get into politics, that's their right. So, what I said, however, is that everyone now would have to, like we, withstand scrutiny. Every week you get asked about everything under the sun. Personally, I have been vilified. I've been asked all sorts of questions here, and I have to give answers. The media and everyone else, and the political opponents of all the parties, because when you're contesting the elections, you have to be prepared to answer questions. And that's when the questions will be posed. Not necessarily by the People's Progressive Party, but I'm sure if you have a media conference, you will get a chance, every member of the media here will get a chance to ask all the probing questions of the individuals concerned. So right now, I don't worry as General Secretary of the PPP. I know what we will campaign on. And we're campaigning on our plans for the future, the vision for Guyana, delivering on our promises, on addressing all of these issues. We're not in any entertainment business. We're not in that. And we're convinced that the PPP will win a landslide at the elections. We've done our polls, so we know we've tested all of these issues. Not the polls that they had going around the last weekend that anybody could vote. I could put critic and two donkeys and show a donkey ahead of you in one of the polls. Because they're not scientific. I just could vote 10 times or get people to vote. I could put a donkey ahead of you winning the poll. So those are not scientific polls. We have done our polling across the country about what matters to people and the delivery. And we're pleased. We're extremely pleased. And we're pleased with the popularity of Irfan Ali. Very pleased with his popularity. And so right now we're heading, once we continue working hard for the people of this country, we're heading for a landslide when the elections are held. And AFC and APNU and all of the others and everyone else that they're hoping would make a difference, they should. I don't know if they actually believe this themselves, but they will be very, very disappointed again if they hope that somehow.
Jagdeo, as I indicated for last week and the week before, I'll do a weekly follow-up with the progress of a level playing field for media. How is that coming up with the budget? I know you say you spoke to
that would be good, but
Minister Ashney.
That would be an issue once they have money in the budget for advertisement. That should be the policy of the government. That is, Minister McCoy should be able to start putting a framework a transparent framework to this new policy. Yeah.
Dr. Jagdeo Winletter with Chariot News Network. We turn in the page to Quindam Bacchus matter. Initially, what was the rationale behind the state to appeal the Quindam Bacchus matter, in which the court has awarded the family with 24 million?
Well, the thing is that clearly you had someone in government who believed that we needed to appeal this matter, and the president has a different view on the matter, and I shared the president's view as the chief executive of the country. So I'm happy that he actually did that. He withdrew the appeal. Or he directed that the appeal be withdrawn. You can ask around. Okay, thank you.